In just 92 seconds, a single congresswoman was about to expose something that would send shockwaves through the highest levels of American intelligence. John Ratcliffe, Trump's pick to lead the CIA, sat in that hearing room, thinking he'd prepared for every question. He hadn't prepared for Jasmine Crockett. What she revealed in those 92 seconds wasn't just damaging. It was devastating. The room went silent. Cameras zoomed in. And what happened next would become one of the most viral moments in congressional hearing history. But here's what the mainstream media won't tell you. This wasn't just about one man's confirmation hearing. This was about a pattern of behavior that had been hidden for years. A web of decisions, classified reports, and political maneuvering that, when exposed to daylight, revealed something far more disturbing than anyone expected. Today, we're going to break down exactly what happened in that hearing room, minute by minute, revelation by revelation. We'll show you the documents Crockett referenced, the body language experts missed, and the one question that changed everything. Because what you're about to discover isn't just political theater. It's a masterclass in how power operates in the shadows, and what happens when someone refuses to let it stay there. Let's dive in. To understand why that 92-second exchange was so explosive, we need to rewind. Not just to the beginning of the hearing, but to the months of preparation that led to this moment. John Ratcliffe wasn't just any nominee. This was a man who had served as Director of National Intelligence under Trump, who had declassified documents that sparked massive controversy, and who had made enemies across the intelligence community. His nomination to lead the CIA was always going to be contentious. But here's what most people don't realize. Confirmation hearings are rarely about discovery. They're carefully choreographed performances. Nominees spend weeks in murder boards, mock hearings where teams of lawyers pummel them with the hardest possible questions. By the time they sit before Congress, they've rehearsed every answer, every pause, every expression. Ratcliffe had gone through this process. His team had prepared hundreds of pages of briefing materials. They'd gamed every potential line of attack from Democrats. They thought they were ready. They were wrong. Jasmine Crockett, the freshman congresswoman from Texas's 30th district, had been doing her homework too. But her preparation looked different. While Ratcliffe's team was crafting carefully worded non-answers, Crockett's team was building something else, a timeline. This timeline connected dots that had never been connected publicly before. It linked Ratcliffe's statements to classified reports, his public testimony to private actions, his denials to documented facts. And she'd found something. Something buried in a CIA Inspector General report that had been partially declassified just weeks before the hearing. Something that contradicted almost everything Ratcliffe had said publicly about his time in intelligence leadership. The morning of the hearing, Capitol Hill was buzzing with the usual energy. Protesters outside, media setting up cameras, senators reviewing their questions one last time. But in Crockett's office, something different was happening. Her chief of staff had just received confirmation from a whistleblower source. The document they'd been waiting for. A memo that would corroborate everything in that CIA report. Had been verified as authentic. They had 30 minutes before the hearing started. Crockett made a decision that would define her political career. She rewrote her entire line of questioning. Threw out the safe questions her advisors had recommended, and decided to go for the jugular. As members filed into the hearing room at 10 a.m., Ratcliffe looked confident, poised. He smiled at colleagues. shook hands. His wife sat behind him in the front row. Everything about his demeanor said, "I've got this." Senator Warner, the committee chairman, gavelled the hearing to order. The opening statements began. Ratcliffe delivered his prepared remarks flawlessly. He spoke about protecting America, honoring intelligence professionals, and maintaining bipartisan cooperation. It was smooth, polished, rehearsed. The early rounds of questioning were predictable. Republicans lobbed softballs. Democrats asked pointed, but expected questions about politicization of intelligence, handling of classified information, and his relationship with Trump. Ratcliffe handled each question with practiced ease. He acknowledged concerns while defending his record. He promised to be apolitical. He cited his experience. He looked every bit the qualified nominee. Hours passed. The hearing was following the script everyone expected. Cable news started to lose interest. Analysts began saying this confirmation was on track. And then it was Jasmine Crockett's turn. "Mr. Ratcliffe, thank you for being here today." Crockett's opening was polite, almost friendly. Ratcliffe nodded, probably thinking this would be another round of standard partisan questioning that he could deflect with his usual responses. "I want to talk about your time as DNI, specifically regarding intelligence assessments about foreign election interference." Still standard territory. Ratcliffe had answered versions of this question a dozen times already. His team had prepared extensive responses. He leaned forward slightly, ready to deliver his talking points. "You testified before Congress in September 2020 that China represented a greater threat to election interference than Russia. Do you recall that testimony?" "I do," Ratcliffe responded smoothly. "And I stand by that assessment based on the intelligence I reviewed as DNI." "Interesting," Crockett said, her tone still measured. "Because I have here." She held up a document. A CIA analytical report from August 2020, prepared by career analysts, that reached the opposite conclusion. It assessed with high confidence that Russia was conducting the most significant and aggressive election interference operation. Ratcliffe didn't flinch. This discrepancy had been reported before. He had his answer ready. "Congresswoman, intelligence analysis involves weighing multiple streams of information. Different agencies can reach different conclusions based on the same facts. That's why we have a DNI, to synthesize these varying perspectives." It was a good answer. Technically accurate. Politically safe. Crockett nodded slowly. "Right. Different perspectives. Let me ask you this. Did you personally review the CIA's assessment before making your public statements about China being the greater threat?" A slight pause. Just a fraction of a second. But Crockett caught it. "I reviewed assessments from across the intelligence community." "That's not what I asked, Mr. Ratcliffe. Did you personally review the CIA's August 2020 assessment before contradicting it publicly?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I was briefed on various intelligence products." Or Mr. Ratcliffe. "Yes or no? Did you read the CIA's assessment?" The room was starting to pay attention now. Other members looked up from their phones. Cameras focused tighter on Ratcliffe's face. "I don't recall the specific timeline of which documents I reviewed when, Congresswoman." It was the first crack. Not a major one, but Crockett had found something. She pressed. "Let me help refresh your memory. This CIA assessment was delivered to your office on August 12, 2020. It was marked IMNDIATPIO or ITY. The briefing log shows it was hand-delivered to you personally. And yet, 3 weeks later, you testified before Congress with an assessment that directly contradicted it." Ratcliffe's jaw tightened slightly. His lawyer leaned in to whisper something. The hearing room had gone quiet. Congresswoman, intelligence work involves. What it involves, Mr. Ratcliffe, is telling the truth to Congress. You were asked directly about Russian interference. You downplayed it, you redirected to China. And you did this despite having in your possession a CIA report that said the opposite. I synthesized multiple intelligence streams. Or you cherry-picked intelligence that fit a political narrative. That's not accurate. Then help me understand. Crockett's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Because here's what confuses me. 3 career CIA analysts worked on this August 2020 assessment. All 3 had decades of experience in counterintelligence. All 3 reviewed extensive signals intelligence, human intelligence, and open source reporting. They reached a unanimous conclusion about Russian interference. She paused, letting that sink in. And then you, who had been DNI for less than a year, with no prior intelligence experience, decided they were wrong. Not just wrong, but so wrong that you felt comfortable testifying to Congress that China was the bigger threat. Did I get that right? The room was absolutely silent now. This wasn't the partisan back and forth everyone expected. This was something else. Ratcliffe cleared his throat. With respect, Congresswoman, the DNI has access to intelligence across all agencies. I had information. What information? What specific intelligence did you have that 3 career CIA analysts missed? Some of that information was and remains classified. How convenient. Crockett leaned back. Mr. Ratcliffe, I'm going to read you something. This is from a memo written by one of those CIA analysts. It was declassified last month as part of the Inspector General's review. She picked up another document. The camera zoomed in. Pages with black redaction bars visible. This analyst wrote, and I quote, "My assessment was altered without consultation. When I objected, I was told the DNI had different priorities. When I asked what intelligence supported the change, I was not given an answer. This is not analysis. This is politics." The room erupted. Whispers, gasps, chairs scraping. Ratcliffe's face had gone from confident to something harder to read. Congresswoman, I don't know the context of. The context is clear, Mr. Ratcliffe. Career analysts did their jobs. They followed the intelligence. They reached a conclusion. And then their work was overridden for political reasons. That's an unfair characterization. Is it? Because there's more. This same analyst filed an internal complaint through the CIA's ombudsman. Do you know what happened to that complaint? Ratcliffe said nothing. It was referred to your office as DNI for resolution. And do you know what your office did with it? Still nothing. They buried it. Didn't investigate. Didn't respond. Just made it disappear. This was the setup. Everything up to this point had been establishing the foundation, proving the pattern, building the case piece by piece. Crockett had Ratcliffe on his heels, but she hadn't delivered the knockout punch yet. That was coming. Crockett paused. She looked down at her notes, then back up at Ratcliffe. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Quieter, more intense. Let's to Ratcliffe, let's talk about Yemen. Those 5 words changed everything. You could see it in Ratcliffe's body language. The slight straightening. The quick glance to his lawyer. The clasping of hands on the table. In December 2020, you received a CIA assessment about a planned operation in Yemen. This operation had been in development for months. It involved targeting a terror cell that intelligence showed was planning attacks on U.S. personnel. Do you recall this? I recall we conducted numerous counterterrorism operations. This specific operation, Mr. Ratcliffe. Yemen, December 2020. Do you recall it? I would need to review classified materials before discussing. The operation was called Crescent Thunder. Does that help your memory? The name clearly meant something. Ratcliffe's expression hardened. Congresswoman, that operation is classified at the highest levels. Was classified. Past tense. Crockett held up another document. The Inspector General declassified portions of the operational report specifically for this hearing. The committee received it this morning. The room exploded again. Members scrambling for copies. Staff whispering urgently. Cameras clicking rapidly. Senator Warner gavelled for order. Ms. Crockett, what's the relevance of this line of questioning to Mr. Ratcliffe's nomination? I'm establishing a pattern, Mr. Chairman. A pattern of disregarding intelligence assessments when they don't align with political objectives, and I'm about to show how that pattern didn't just affect testimony. It affected operations. Operations that put lives at risk. Warner looked uncomfortable but nodded. Proceed. But carefully. Crockett turned back to Ratcliffe. Operation Crescent Thunder. The CIA assessment recommended a covered approach with minimal footprint. Small team. Surgical strike. Maximum intelligence gathering. Minimal risk of civilian casualties or diplomatic blowback. Is that consistent with your memory? As I said, I cannot discuss classified operations. Or Mr. Ratcliffe. I'm reading from a declassified report. I'm not asking you to reveal anything that's still classified. I'm asking you to confirm what's already public as of this morning. Did the CIA recommend a covert, minimal footprint operation? A long pause. That was one recommendation among several. It was the recommendation. From the CIA station chief in the region. From the counterterrorism analysts. From the operational planners. Everyone who actually knew the terrain, the intelligence, the risks, they all recommended the same approach. Crockett's voice was rising now, controlled but forceful. And you overruled them. You ordered a larger operation. More assets, more visibility. Against the unanimous recommendation of career professionals. The DNI has the authority to make operational decisions based on. Based on what, Mr. Ratcliffe? What intelligence did you have that everyone else missed? What expertise did you bring to counterterrorism operations in Yemen that CIA professionals with decades of experience didn't have? Ratcliffe's face was flushed now. I made the decision I believed was in America's national security interests. Your decision got 6 people killed. The room went dead silent. Crockett let those words hang in the air. 6 people killed. The operation you ordered went forward in January 2021. It was compromised because of the larger footprint. The terror cell was alerted. They were ready. 4 U.S. Special operations personnel were killed in the firefight. 2 local intelligence assets were executed after the operation exposed them. Her voice cracked slightly, almost imperceptibly. 6 families destroyed, because you decided you knew better than the professionals. 6 funerals because political optics mattered more than operational security. Ratcliffe looked like he'd been punched. Congresswoman. That operation was complex. There were multiple factors. There was one factor that mattered. The CIA told you not to do it. They warned you it was too risky. They said the intelligence didn't support that approach. And you did it anyway. That's an oversimplification. Is it? Because here's what the CIA Inspector General concluded. She picked up the report again. And I quote, "The operational failure in Yemen can be directly attributed to the decision to disregard CIA operational planning and implement an alternative approach that lacked intelligence support and exceeded risk thresholds. This decision was made at the DNI level against unanimous operational recommendations. Crockett looked up from the document. That's you, Mr. Ratcliffe. You're the DNI level. Those 6 deaths are your responsibility. The hearing room was in chaos now. Members shouting, staff rushing around, media frantically typing. Ratcliffe sat frozen, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. But Crockett wasn't done. Now, here's the part that really keeps me up at night, Mr. Ratcliffe. Want to know why you overruled the CIA's operational recommendation? She didn't wait for an answer. According to interviews conducted by the Inspector General, you wanted a bigger win before leaving office. You wanted an operation that would make headlines. That would cement your legacy. That would show you were tough on terrorism. Her voice was shaking now with barely controlled anger. 6 people died for your legacy. 6 American heroes and allies came home in boxes because you wanted a splashier news cycle? That is absolutely false. Ratcliffe's composure finally cracked. I made that decision based on intelligence assessments. Show me the assessment. Show me one piece of intelligence that supported your decision. It's classified. Then how can we trust you? How can this committee possibly confirm you to lead the CIA when you've shown a pattern of disregarding CIA analysis, overruling CIA professionals, and making decisions that get people killed? And then you hide behind classification when asked to explain yourself. The exchange was electric. Viral clips were already being uploaded. Ratcliffe herring was trending. Cable news had cut to live coverage. And Crockett had one more card to play. Mr. Ratcliffe, I'm going to ask you a direct question. And I want to remind you that you're under oath. She let that sink in. Did you have any conversations with White House officials about the timing or visibility of Operation Crescent Thunder before you overruled the CIA's operational plan? Ratcliffe went pale. I had numerous conversations with White House officials about counterterrorism operations. That's not what I asked. Did you discuss THIS specific operation and its potential political or media impact with White House officials before you made your decision? The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Every camera in the room was locked on Ratcliffe's face. Congresswoman, my conversations with the White House involved national security considerations. You did. You discussed it. You talked about timing, about media impact, about legacy. And then you made a decision that contradicted CIA professionals because it would play better politically. That's speculation. It's in the Inspector General's report. They interviewed White House staffers. They reviewed communications logs. They documented meetings where this operation was discussed in political terms. Crockett's voice dropped lower, more deadly. You got people killed for a photo op, Mr. Ratcliffe. And now you want us to put you in charge of the entire CIA. Those 92 seconds. From when Crockett asked about conversations with White House officials to when she delivered that final accusation, were devastating. Complete, unanswerable. Ratcliffe tried to respond, but his words were jumbled. Defensive, unconvincing. Senator Warner called for a recess. The room erupted as members left the dais. Media swarmed. Ratcliffe sat at the witness table looking shell-shocked. But the damage was done. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Every major news outlet led with it. ALEFE grado all-and-DDLYA monoratio, CIA nominee AACD OFOVR expats. Jetang CX Kela ED, JSBME CRKTs XB OZ non 922 CKL and EO. Debum, the video was being watched millions of times. Political analysts were calling it a career-ending exchange. Republican senators who had planned to vote for confirmation started hedging. But here's what makes this story even more incredible: Crockett wasn't done. During the recess, more information started emerging. The Inspector General's report she'd referenced. It was more damaging than anyone realized. Reporters who got copies started reading through the unredacted sections. The report revealed that Ratcliffe hadn't just overruled CIA professionals on Yemen. It was a pattern across his entire tenure as DNI. An operation in Syria. CIA recommended surveillance only. Ratcliffe pushed for direct action. Intelligence was compromised. An assessment about Iran's nuclear program. CIA analysts concluded the program was contained. Ratcliffe altered the conclusion to suggest imminent threat. A counterintelligence investigation into Russian oligarchs. CIA wanted to continue monitoring. Ratcliffe shut it down after those oligarchs made donations to Trump allies. The pattern was clear, and it was devastating. When the hearing reconvened after the recess, the atmosphere had completely changed. Even Republican committee members looked grim. They knew what was coming. Ratcliffe returned to the witness table, looking like a man heading to his execution. His lawyer had clearly told him the confirmation was in serious jeopardy. But Crockett wasn't done dropping bombs. "Mr. Ratcliffe, I want to return to something you said earlier about synthesizing multiple intelligence streams. You used that phrase several times to justify overruling CIA assessments." He nodded warily. "I've reviewed your personnel file from your time as DNI. Your educational background. Your work experience before entering politics. Can you tell the committee what specific training or experience you had in intelligence analysis before becoming DNI?" Ratcliffe shifted uncomfortably. "I served on the House Intelligence Committee. That's oversight, not analysis." "What training did you have in actually conducting intelligence analysis?" "Reading signals intelligence. Assessing human intelligence sources. Evaluating technical collection. I received briefings." "Briefings aren't training, Mr. Ratcliffe. So let me ask directly before becoming DNI. Had you ever worked as an intelligence analyst?" "Nope." "Had you ever worked in any capacity for an intelligence agency?" "No." "But, had you taken any courses, received any certifications, completed any programs in intelligence analysis?" "No, I had not." "So when you talk about synthesizing intelligence streams, you're describing a skill you had no training in, overruling professionals who had decades of experience and extensive training. Does that seem problematic to you?" "Congresswoman, the DNI doesn't need to be an analyst. The position requires leadership. The position requires judgment. And you've demonstrated spectacularly poor judgment, repeatedly, at the cost of American lives." The exchange was brutal, clinical, precise. Crockett methodically went through Ratcliffe's record. Each decision where he'd overruled professionals. Each time he'd cherry-picked intelligence. Each instance where political considerations had trumped analytical rigor. And she had receipts for everything. Inspector General reports, analyst testimony, operational reviews, communications logs. It wasn't just devastating to Ratcliffe's nomination. It was a masterclass in congressional oversight. This is what accountability looked like. Other committee members piled on. Democrats, obviously, but also some Republicans who couldn't ignore the evidence. Questions came rapid fire. How many CIA analysts filed complaints during your tenure? Why were none of those complaints investigated? Did you ever receive training on the intelligence community, directive on analytic standards? How many operations went wrong after you overruled CIA recommendations?" Ratcliffe tried to answer, but he was drowning. Every response opened new lines of attack. Every deflection revealed another problematic decision. By the time the hearing ended at 6 p.m., his nomination was effectively dead. Senators were already telling reporters they couldn't support confirmation. Political operatives were calculating whether Trump would withdraw the nomination or force a floor vote he'd lose. Jasmine Crockett had single-handedly derailed a cabinet nomination. But the story doesn't end there. In the days following the hearing, investigative reporters started digging deeper into the Inspector General's report and the broader pattern of Ratcliffe's decision-making. What they found was even more troubling. The Yemen operation wasn't just about wanting a bigger win. It was about timing. According to the report, Ratcliffe had explicitly discussed the operation's timing with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. They wanted the operation to occur before Biden's inauguration. They wanted a counterterrorism victory they could tout as part of Trump's legacy. But here's the kicker: the intelligence suggested the terror cell wasn't planning imminent action. The CIA assessment recommended continued surveillance to gather more intelligence and potentially roll up a larger network. Ratcliffe overruled that recommendation because waiting would mean the operation happened under Biden's watch. The political calendar mattered more than the operational timeline. 6 people died because of an election calendar. Reporters also uncovered more about those CIA analysts who'd filed complaints. There were 11 of them across Ratcliffe's tenure. 11 career professionals who'd raised concerns about politicization of intelligence, improper handling of assessments, and pressure to reach predetermined conclusions. Not one of those complaints was properly investigated while Ratcliffe was DNI. In fact, several of the analysts who'd complained found their careers stalled, passed over for promotions, assigned to less significant portfolios. One was forced into early retirement. This wasn't just poor judgment. It was retaliation. The Washington Post obtained emails showing Ratcliffe's staff explicitly discussing how to manage analysts who were problematic, meaning those who wouldn't alter their assessments to match political preferences. One email was particularly damning. Ratcliffe's chief of staff wrote, "These career people don't understand that intelligence exists to support policy, not constrain it. We need to find ways to work around the ones who won't get with the program. That's not how intelligence is supposed to work. Intelligence should inform policy, not be twisted to justify predetermined political positions." But it gets worse. Investigative reporters discovered that the Yemen operation wasn't the only deadly outcome of Ratcliffe's decisions. Remember that Syria operation where he'd overruled CIA recommendations? 2 local intelligence sources were killed after that operation was compromised. Their families were never notified that poor operational security contributed to their deaths. The CIA had wanted to provide them compensation and assistance relocating their families. Ratcliffe's office blocked it, worried about the optics of acknowledging a failed operation. So not only were people getting killed because of poor decisions, but their families were being abandoned to avoid political embarrassment. The human cost of politicizing intelligence was becoming horrifyingly clear. CNN obtained portions of the CIA station chief's cable from Yemen, sent weeks before the operation. It was a stark warning. Current intelligence does not support a direct action operation of the proposed scale. Target Network has demonstrated advanced counterintelligence capabilities. Increasing operational footprint exponentially increases risk of compromise. Strongly recommend continued surveillance and penetration operations before considering direct action. Ratcliffe ignored every word of that assessment. The station chief also wrote, "If decision is made to proceed against recommendation, request documentation of intelligence supporting alternative operational approach." That documentation never came, because it didn't exist. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was doing more interviews in 3 days than most freshman Congress members do in a year. Every news show wanted her. She was being hailed as a hero of oversight, a champion of accountability. But in interviews, she kept bringing the focus back to the victims. "This isn't about me embarrassing someone at a hearing," she told Rachel Maddow. "This is about 6 people who died because someone thought political considerations mattered more than professional expertise. It's about CIA analysts who were pushed out of their careers for trying to do their jobs with integrity. It's about an intelligence community that was corrupted by political pressure." She continued. "And the scary part, Ratcliffe isn't unique. He's just the one who got caught. How many other political appointees are making similar decisions? How many other operations have gone wrong because experts were overruled? How many other analysts are being silenced?" It was a powerful message, and it was resonating. Within a week, 3 more whistleblowers came forward from the intelligence community. They described similar patterns under Ratcliffe and other political appointees. Pressure to alter assessments, retaliation for objecting, political considerations overriding analytical judgment. One whistleblower, a former CIA counterterrorism analyst with 22 years of experience, gave an anonymous interview to ProPublica. "It became impossible to do the job," she said. "You'd spend months on an assessment, following the intelligence wherever it led, applying rigorous analytical tradecraft. Then, you'd brief it up the chain and be told it wasn't helpful." That's the word they used. Helpful. As if intelligence exists to help politicians rather than inform them. She continued. "I watched analysts change their conclusions because they knew anything else would be rejected. I watched people self-censor because speaking truth to power got you marginalized. The entire culture shifted from follow the intelligence to tell them what they want to hear." This was the deeper story Crockett's questioning had exposed. It wasn't just about John Ratcliffe. It was about this systematic politicization of intelligence and the deadly consequences when political considerations trump professional expertise. The Senate Intelligence Committee announced it would conduct a broader investigation into decision-making processes at ODNI during Ratcliffe's tenure. Several senators called for similar reviews at other intelligence agencies. 2 weeks after the hearing, Trump withdrew Ratcliffe's nomination. The official statement cited unforeseen complications and thanked Ratcliffe for his service. But everyone knew the truth. Jasmine Crockett had ended his career in 92 seconds. But here's what happened next that most people don't know about. The families of the 6 killed in Yemen, 4 American Special Operations personnel, and 2 local intelligence assets. They'd been living with incomplete information. The Pentagon had told the service members' families it was a combat operation that encountered unexpected resistance. Generic. Vague. The local assets' families were told even less. Just that their loved ones had died working with Americans. No details. No acknowledgement of the operational failures. After Crockett's hearing and the subsequent media coverage, these families started asking questions. If the operation had been compromised because of poor decision-making, why were they told it was just bad luck? The families hired lawyers. They wanted answers. They wanted accountability. One family, the widow of a Navy SEAL killed in the operation, reached out to Crockett directly. "I need to know why my husband died," she wrote in an email that Crockett later shared publicly, with permission. "The Navy told me he died a hero, which I never doubted. But now I'm reading that the operation wasn't supposed to happen the way it did. That it was compromised because someone made a bad decision. I need to know if my husband died because of someone's ego." Crockett met with her. Spent 3 hours going through what she could share from the unclassified portions of the Inspector General's report. The meeting destroyed both of them emotionally. She asked me if her husband would still be alive, if the CIA's recommendation had been followed. Crockett said in a later interview, her voice breaking, "I couldn't tell her yes for certain, because operations carry risk. But I had to be honest. The operation was compromised because of the larger footprint. The intelligence supported the CIA's approach. Her husband's death was preventable." The widow filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the federal government. 3 other families joined her. The local assets families had an even harder road. They weren't American citizens. They had fewer legal options. They'd been abandoned by the intelligence services they'd helped. Crockett introduced legislation to provide compensation and support for intelligence assets and their families when operations fail due to poor decision-making by political appointees. It was called the Intelligence Asset Protection Act. The bill faced immediate opposition. Republicans called it Monday morning quarterbacking. Said it would make intelligence leaders risk-averse. Claimed it would harm operational effectiveness. But Crockett kept pushing. "If we don't protect the people who risk everything to help us," she argued on the House floor, "why would anyone work with American intelligence? These people aren't collateral damage. They're partners. They deserve better than being abandoned when political appointees screw up." The bill eventually passed the House, with bipartisan support. Its fate in the Senate remained uncertain. But the conversation had shifted. Meanwhile, something else was happening inside the intelligence community. Analysts were finding their voices. The Intelligence Community Analysts Association, a professional organization that had been mostly apolitical, issued a public statement. It was unprecedented. Recent revelations about political interference in intelligence analysis threaten the integrity of our work and the safety of our nation. Intelligence exists to inform decision makers, not to confirm their biases. When political considerations override analytical judgment, people die. Operations fail. America becomes less safe. The statement continued. "We call on Congress to strengthen protections for intelligence professionals who raise concerns about politicization. We call on agency leaders to recommit to analytical standards and objectivity. And we call on the American people to demand better from those who lead our intelligence community." 17 current and former intelligence officials signed their names to the statement. It was a remarkable act of professional courage. The backlash was immediate. Conservative media attacked the signatories as deep state operatives trying to undermine political leadership. Some faced harassment, death threats, but they didn't back down. One signatory, a former CIA analyst who'd worked on Middle East counterterrorism for 25 years, did an interview with 60 Minutes. "I signed that statement knowing it might hurt my reputation in some circles," he said. "But I watched good people die because someone with no intelligence experience thought he knew better than career professionals. I watched analysts get pushed out for doing their jobs with integrity. I couldn't stay silent anymore," he continued. "People need to understand, When intelligence gets politicized, the consequences aren't abstract. They're measured in body bags, in blown operations, in compromised sources, in strategic failures that make America less safe. This isn't about politics. It's about life and death. The interview got 15 million views. The conversation was truly shifting. Meanwhile, the Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation was uncovering more problems. Not just with Ratcliffe, but across multiple political appointments in recent administrations, both Republican and Democrat. There was a pattern. Political appointees with no intelligence experience or training making operational and analytical decisions that career professionals disagreed with, often with poor outcomes. A former CIA director testified in a closed hearing, portions of which later leaked. We've created a system where political loyalty matters more than expertise, where knowing how to please the White House is valued more than knowing how to analyze intelligence or run operations. And we're paying the price. The investigation revealed at least 12 other instances during Ratcliffe's tenure where operations had failed or been compromised after political appointees overruled professional recommendations. 12. The human cost was staggering. Beyond the 6 deaths in Yemen, there were 3 intelligence sources executed after operations were compromised in Eastern Europe, a multi-year counterintelligence operation blown because someone wanted faster results to see our officers injured in an operation that intelligence suggested wasn't ready. Dozens of local assets and their families left in danger after operations failed. When these had a common thread: political appointees overruling professional expertise. The Senate committee issued preliminary findings that shook Washington. They recommended requiring minimum intelligence experience for senior intelligence community positions, strengthening Inspector General independence and whistleblower protections, creating an independent review board for operational decisions that override agency recommendations, mandating congressional notification when political appointees overrule career professional assessments. These weren't radical proposals. They were common sense protections against exactly what had happened under Ratcliffe. But they faced fierce opposition from those who argued it would constrain presidential authority and create bureaucratic obstacles. The fight over these reforms became the next battleground. What Jasmine Crockett exposed in that hearing room wasn't just about John Ratcliffe, or even just about the intelligence community. It was about something deeper. The cost of choosing loyalty over expertise, politics over professionalism, optics over outcomes. And it was happening everywhere. In the weeks following the hearing, journalists started investigating similar patterns in other agencies. What they found was alarming. At the CDC during the pandemic, political appointees had overruled epidemiologists on mask guidance, testing protocols, and vaccine messaging. The result: confused public health messaging that undermined trust and cost lives. At NOAA, political officials had pressured meteorologists to alter hurricane forecasts to match presidential tweets. The Sharpiegate scandal had seemed absurd at the time, but it reflected a deeper rot: political considerations overriding scientific expertise. At the EPA, career scientists found their research on climate change and pollution suppressed or altered when findings didn't align with administration priorities. At the Department of Justice, career prosecutors watched political appointees make charging decisions based on partisan considerations rather than legal merits. The pattern was everywhere, and it was bipartisan. Administrations of both parties had allowed politics to corrupt professional expertise. though the scale and severity varied. But Crockett's hearing had done something important. It had made the consequences visceral and undeniable. 6 people dead. Not because of bad luck or unavoidable circumstances, but because someone put political considerations above professional judgment. That clarity was powerful. Other members of Congress started asking harder questions in their own committee hearings. The standard practice of lobbing softballs at friendly witnesses and performative outrage at opposed ones started giving way to something more substantive. Representative Katie Porter used Crockett's approach in a hearing on FDA drug approvals, exposing how political pressure had rushed an ineffective treatment to market. Representative Jamie Raskin applied similar tactics in investigating January 6th, methodically documenting how political appointees ignored intelligence warnings about potential violence. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez used the technique to expose how political donors influenced environmental enforcement decisions at EPA. The Crockett method, as it became known in political circles, was spreading. It had several key elements: do the homework. Crockett had spent months building her case, finding documents, interviewing sources, and constructing an airtight timeline. She knew more about the subject than the witness expected. Start with facts, not opinions. She didn't lead with accusations. She established facts that couldn't be disputed, building a foundation brick by brick. Let the pattern speak. Rather than making broad claims, she showed specific instances that revealed a larger pattern. The pattern became undeniable. Make it about people, not politics. She focused on the human cost. 6 deaths, abandoned families, silenced professionals. That made it harder to dismiss as partisan theater. Have receipts for everything. Every claim was backed by documents, testimony, or verifiable records. No speculation. No assumptions. Just evidence. Stay calm and precise. Even when delivering devastating accusations, she maintained composure. The facts were damning enough, she didn't need theatrical outrage. It was a masterclass in effective congressional oversight. And it was changing the culture of accountability in Washington. But it came at a cost. Crockett became a target. Conservative media attacked her relentlessly. She received death threats. Her office was inundated with hostile calls and emails. Social media harassment was constant. Some of it was just standard partisan warfare, but some of it was darker. Coordinated campaigns to discredit her, dox her staff, and intimidate her into silence. She hired additional security. Started varying her routes to work. Became more cautious about public appearances. In an interview with The Atlantic, she was asked if she regretted her questioning of Ratcliffe given the backlash. Not for a second, she said without hesitation. 6 families don't have their loved ones because someone made a bad decision and then tried to hide it. Career professionals were pushed out of their jobs for telling the truth. If asking hard questions about that makes me a target, so be it. That's the job. She continued. The people threatening me aren't the ones who lost family members in Yemen. They're not CIA analysts who were silenced for doing their jobs with integrity. They're people who want to maintain a system where powerful people aren't held accountable. I'm not backing down to them. But the toll was real. Her staff reported burnout from the constant harassment. Her family worried about her safety. She had to make difficult decisions about how visible to be, how much to engage with hostile press, how to balance effectiveness with security. Other members of Congress watched and made their own calculations. Some were inspired to ask harder questions. Others decided the backlash wasn't worth it. The system resisted accountability, but the pressure was building. 3 months after the hearing, the CIA announced new policies. All operational decisions that override career professional recommendations must be documented with intelligence. Support analysts have the right to attach dissenting opinions to assessments that are altered. A new ombudsman office with real independence to investigate politicization complaints, annual reviews of operational decisions to assess outcomes and identify patterns. Weren't just policy changes. They were acknowledgments that the problems Crockett exposed were real and needed to be fixed. Other intelligence agencies announced similar reforms. The FBI, NSA, DIA, all created stronger protections for professional independence and accountability for political interference. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was progress. And it happened because one congresswoman refused to accept carefully crafted non-answers. Because she did her homework. Because she asked the hard questions. Because she made powerful people squirm. Because she made them tell the truth. 6 months after the hearing, something remarkable happened. The Navy SEAL's widow, who'd filed the wrongful death lawsuit, her case was settled. The federal government agreed to a financial settlement and, more importantly, issued a formal acknowledgement. The operation in Yemen had been compromised by inadequate operational planning. Her husband's death was preventable. It was an extraordinary admission. The government almost never acknowledges that operational failures were due to poor decision-making by senior leaders. But the evidence Crockett had exposed made denial impossible. The 3 other families received similar settlements. And in a move that shocked observers, the CIA established a fund to provide support for the local intelligence assets families, the 2 men killed in Yemen and others in similar situations. It wasn't enough to bring anyone back. But it was acknowledgement, accountability, recognition that these lives mattered. At a small, private ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, Crockett attended a memorial for the 4 American service members killed in Yemen. She'd been invited by the families. She stood in the back, trying to be unobtrusive. But after the ceremony, the widow approached her. What happened next, several attendees later described, was one of the most emotional moments they'd ever witnessed. The widow embraced Crockett and said, through tears, "Thank you for giving me the truth. Thank you for making them acknowledge what happened. Thank you for making his death mean something." Crockett broke down. She'd held it together through months of hearings, interviews, and attacks. But in that moment, facing the cost of what she'd uncovered, she couldn't maintain composure. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm sorry it took so long to get the truth. I'm sorry he was put in that position." The widow shook her head. "You didn't put him there. You exposed who did. That matters." A photographer captured the moment. The image, 2 women embracing at Arlington, tears streaming down both faces, became iconic. Conservative media tried to spin it as political theater. But anyone who saw the raw emotion in that photograph knew better. This was real grief. Real accountability. Real human connection across the divide of tragedy. The photograph won a Pulitzer Prize. Meanwhile, the Intelligence Asset Protection Act that Crockett had introduced was making progress in the Senate. After months of negotiation and compromise, a modified version was approaching a floor vote. Senator Mark Warner, who'd been skeptical initially, had become a champion of the bill after the Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation revealed the full scope of how intelligence assets had been abandoned. "Why ask people to risk everything to help us?" He said in floor remarks. Why make them promises? And then when things go wrong because of our mistakes, we walk away. That's not just morally wrong, it's strategically stupid. No one will work with us if we abandon our people. The bill passed the Senate 73-27, a strong bipartisan majority. When it came back to the House for final approval of the Senate amendments, Crockett was asked to give remarks before the vote. She stood at the podium and spoke for 12 minutes. No notes. Just raw, honest reflection on what the last 6 months had taught her. When I asked John Ratcliffe those questions, she began, I knew I was ending his nomination. What I didn't fully grasp was that I was opening a door to a much larger conversation about how we make decisions in this country. She continued, we've built systems where expertise is distrusted, where professional judgment is seen as obstacle rather than asset, where political loyalty matters more than actual competence. And we're paying for it. In lives lost. In operations failed. In trust destroyed. Her voice grew stronger. This bill doesn't fix everything. It can't bring back the people who died in Yemen or Syria or anywhere else because someone made a bad decision. It can't undo the damage done to career professionals who were pushed out for telling the truth. It can't erase the harm caused by politicizing intelligence. She paused. But it can make it harder for this to happen again. It can provide support for the people we've abandoned. It can send a message that expertise matters, that professional judgment matters, that truth matters. Another pause. And maybe, just maybe, it can save the next life. Prevent the next disaster. Protect the next person who risks everything to help America. She looked out at her colleagues. That's worth fighting for. That's worth the death threats, and the harassment and the attacks. Because at the end of the day, we're not here to protect powerful people who make bad decisions. We're here to protect the people who suffer the consequences of those decisions. The House erupted in applause. Not just Democrats, Republicans too. Even members who'd opposed Crockett stood and clapped. The bill passed 4-123. President Biden signed it 2 weeks later. Crockett stood behind him at the signing ceremony, along with the families of those killed in Yemen. It was a victory. But Crockett knew it was just one battle in a much longer war. Because here's what happened next that reveals how deeply resistant the system is to real accountability. The reforms that intelligence agencies had announced. Implementation was slow. Bureaucratic resistance was fierce. The new ombudsman offices were understaffed and underfunded. The documentation requirements for overruling career professionals had loopholes you could drive a truck through. Career intelligence professionals who spoke to reporters on background described continued pressure to alter assessments, continued retaliation for objecting, continued prioritization of political considerations over analytical rigor. One analyst told the New York Times, "The policies changed. The culture didn't. Everyone knows what happened to Ratcliffe. So they're more careful about paper trails. But the substance, political appointees overruling professionals, analysts self-censoring to avoid trouble, that's all still happening. It's just quieter now." This was the frustrating reality. High-profile accountability moments like Crockett's hearing created pressure for reform. Reforms were announced. But then the system absorbed them, worked around them, or simply waited for attention to move elsewhere. And attention was already moving. Within months, new crises dominated the news cycle. The Ratcliffe hearing faded from front pages. Cable news moved on to other controversies. Social media found new things to be outraged about. Crockett tried to keep pressure on. She held oversight hearings on implementation of the new policies. She met regularly with whistleblowers. She pushed for stronger enforcement mechanisms. But she was one person, and she was facing an entire system designed to resist accountability. The opposition was also organizing. A network of conservative groups, some funded by the same donors who'd supported Ratcliffe, launched campaigns to undermine the reforms. They framed it as deep state, bureaucrats constraining elected officials. They argued that intelligence agencies needed to be responsive to political leadership, not independent from it. They claimed that requiring documentation and oversight would make America less safe by slowing down decisions. It was effective messaging. It put reformers on the defensive, forcing them to prove that accountability wouldn't compromise security, rather than opponents proving that political interference was acceptable. And there was some truth to their concerns. Intelligence agencies do need to be accountable to elected officials. There is such a thing as bureaucratic obstruction. The balance between political accountability and professional independence is genuinely complicated. But that nuance got lost in the political warfare. Meanwhile, some career intelligence professionals were getting cold feet about speaking out. They'd seen whistleblowers harassed, their lives disrupted, their careers ended. The protections in the new laws sounded good on paper, but would they work in practice? Several whistleblowers who'd come forward after Crockett's hearing now faced investigations themselves, ostensibly for unrelated issues, but the timing was suspicious. Agencies were looking for reasons to discredit or remove people who'd challenged political interference. One whistleblower, the CIA analyst who'd spoken to ProPublica, found herself under investigation for allegedly mishandling classified information. The investigation was based on a complaint filed by a political appointee she'd accused of pressuring her to alter an assessment. Her lawyers argued it was retaliation. The CIA denied it. The investigation dragged on, effectively silencing her and sending a message to others. Crockett tried to intervene, raising the case in oversight hearings and demanding answers about whether whistleblower protections were being honored. But the CIA hid behind classification and personnel privacy. Congressional oversight only works if agencies cooperate. When they stonewall, there's limited recourse short of subpoenas and court battles that take years. The system was fighting back, and it was winning. This reality was demoralizing. Crockett had exposed genuine wrongdoing. People had been held accountable. Reforms had been enacted. And yet, the fundamental problems persisted. In a candid interview with Mother Jones, she admitted her frustration. "I thought that moment in the hearing would change things," she said. "I thought when people saw the human cost of politicizing intelligence, when they saw what happens when politics overrides expertise, they'd demand better. And there was this brief window where it seemed like that was happening." She sighed. But systems are resilient. Power protects itself. The people who benefit from the current arrangement, where political considerations matter more than truth, they have resources and motivation to resist change. And the people who are harmed by it, career professionals, intelligence assets, service members, the American people, we're diffuse. We're not organized. We move on to other things. The interviewer asked if she regretted pursuing Ratcliffe so aggressively given the limited lasting impact. "No," she said firmly. "Because the alternative is accepting that powerful people can't be held accountable. It's accepting that we can't even try to make things better. That's a road to complete cynicism and democratic decay." She leaned forward. "Look, I'm not naive. I know one hearing doesn't transform a system, but it matters. It showed that accountability is possible. It gave courage to people inside the system who want to do the right thing. It created legal tools, however imperfect, to protect whistleblowers and support intelligence assets. It started conversations that need to be continued. She continued. The fight for accountability isn't a single battle. It's continuous. It's exhausting. It's often frustrating. But it's necessary. Because the alternative, letting powerful people operate without oversight, letting politics corrupt expertise, letting people die because of bad decisions without even acknowledging it, that's unacceptable. It was a more mature, realistic take than the triumphalism that had followed the hearing, and it was probably more accurate. Real change is hard. It's incremental. It requires sustained effort over years and decades, not just viral moments. But viral moments matter too. They crack open doors. They shift conversations. They make space for the incremental work. So where are we now, almost 2 years after that hearing? John Ratcliffe never got confirmed to lead the CIA. Trump eventually nominated someone else, a former military officer with actual intelligence experience, who was confirmed with bipartisan support. Ratcliffe has tried to rehabilitate his reputation. He's joined think tanks, written op-eds, appeared on friendly media. He frames himself as a victim of partisan warfare, claiming his decisions were vindicated, even if politically unpopular. But the facts remain. 6 people died. Analysts were silenced. Intelligence was politicized. No amount of reputation management changes that. The families of those killed in Yemen have used their settlements to establish a foundation supporting Gold Star families and the families of intelligence assets killed in action. They've become advocates for accountability in military and intelligence operations. The widow of the Navy SEAL killed in Yemen testified before Congress last year in support of legislation requiring more rigorous review of special operations. Her testimony was powerful and heartbreaking. "My husband signed up to risk his life for this country," she said. But he didn't sign up to die because someone wanted a better news cycle. None of them did. If we're going to ask people to make that sacrifice, we owe them competent leadership making decisions based on the best possible intelligence and professional military advice. The Intelligence Asset Protection Act is being implemented, though slowly. Several families of assets killed when operations failed have received support. The fund is small and limited, but it's more than existed before. Career intelligence professionals report that the culture has improved marginally in some agencies, gotten worse in others. The new protections help some people, but many still fear retaliation for speaking up. The broader conversation about expertise versus political control continues. It's become a dividing line in debates about everything from pandemic response to climate policy to economic forecasting. Some see Crockett's approach as a model, using rigorous questioning and documented evidence to hold powerful people accountable. Others see it as grandstanding and partisan warfare, dressed up as oversight. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Crockett's questioning was legitimate oversight, but it was also politically beneficial for her. Good governance and political advantage aren't mutually exclusive. What's undeniable is that she changed the conversation. Before that hearing, the politicization of intelligence was discussed in abstract terms. After it, there was a human face. 6 dead, families abandoned, careers destroyed. That matters. Jasmine Crockett herself has become one of the most effective members of Congress at oversight. She's applied her approach to other agencies and issues. She's become someone political appointees fear facing in hearings, because they know she'll be prepared and persistent. But she's also become more realistic about what congressional oversight can achieve. Less triumphalist, more focused on incremental progress. In a recent podcast interview, she reflected on what she'd learned. The system doesn't change because of one viral moment, she said. It changes because people use moments like that to push for concrete reforms, and then defend those reforms when the system tries to roll them back, and then build on them over time. She continued, "What happened in that hearing mattered. But what matters more is what we've done since. The legislation we passed, the policies we've changed, the culture we're slowly shifting. That's less sexy. It doesn't go viral. But it's the actual work of accountability." She was asked what advice she'd give to people who feel cynical about whether accountability is possible in American government. "I understand the cynicism," she said. "I feel it sometimes too. But here's what I know: 6 families got acknowledgement that their loved ones' deaths were preventable. Career professionals got some protections for speaking truth to power. Intelligence assets got some support when operations fail." She paused. "Is it enough? No. Is the system fixed? Definitely not. But is it better than it was 2 years ago? Yes. And that happened because people demanded accountability and refused to accept carefully crafted lies." Another pause. "So my advice is, don't expect any single moment to fix everything, but don't give up on the possibility of progress. Hold powerful people accountable. Support those who do. Demand better, and recognize that change is usually incremental and imperfect. It's not a soaring message. It's not particularly inspiring, but it's realistic. And maybe that's what we need. Less faith in viral moments and transformational leaders, more commitment to sustained, unglamorous work of making things slightly better. So what can we learn from this entire saga? What does the Ratcliffe hearing and its aftermath teach us about accountability, expertise, and power in American government? First, preparation is everything. Crockett's effectiveness in that hearing wasn't because she was naturally gifted at interrogation or because she got lucky. It was because she and her staff spent months building an airtight case. They found the documents. They interviewed the sources. They constructed the timeline. They anticipated the deflections and prepared for them. Too much congressional oversight is performative. Members asking questions they know won't be answered, making speeches instead of seeking truth, prioritizing viral clips over actual accountability. Crockett showed a different model. Do the homework. Build the case. Ask questions you already know the answers to so you can catch lies. Use documents to back up every claim. Be surgical, not theatrical. That approach works. But it requires work that most members of Congress aren't willing to do. Second, make it about people, not abstractions. The politicization of intelligence could have been discussed in abstract, technical terms. Instead, Crockett made it about 6 specific people who died. She named them. She talked about their families. She made the cost real and undeniable. That matters because humans respond to stories about individuals more than to abstract principles or statistics. 6 deaths in Yemen is comprehensible and emotionally resonant in a way that systemic politicization of intelligence isn't. This is both a rhetorical technique and a moral imperative. Policy failures have human costs. Accountability requires making those costs visible. Third, the system resists accountability always. Even when wrongdoing is exposed. Even when there's public outrage. Even when reforms are enacted. The system fights back. Through bureaucratic resistance, through finding loopholes, through waiting for attention to move elsewhere. This means that viral moments of accountability, however satisfying, are just the beginning. The real work is sustained pressure, monitoring implementation, defending reforms, and building on initial progress. That work is boring. It doesn't go viral. It doesn't generate heroic narratives. But it's essential. Fourth, expertise matters. At the core of the Ratcliffe scandal was a simple principle: people and experience know more than people without it. Career CIA analysts understand intelligence better than political appointees who've never worked in intelligence. Operational planners understand risk better than politicians looking for headlines. This seems obvious, but it's contested in modern politics. There's a populist strain that treats expertise as elitism, that sees career professionals as the deep state, that values political loyalty over competence. The cost of that attitude is measured in blown operations, botched responses to crises, and preventable deaths. Restoring respect for expertise, while maintaining appropriate political accountability, is one of the critical challenges of our time. Fifth, whistleblowers are essential and vulnerable. Everything Crockett exposed came from whistleblowers, career professionals who risked their careers to reveal wrongdoing. The CIA analysts who documented how their work was altered. The Inspector General investigators who wouldn't back down. The sources who provided documents. Without them, none of the accountability would have been possible. But they paid a price. Some lost their jobs. Some faced investigations. All faced harassment and professional damage. We need whistleblowers. But we treat them terribly. Until that changes, many people who see wrongdoing will stay silent. Sixth, political courage is rare and costly. Crockett could have asked safe questions at that hearing. She could have avoided directly confronting a powerful political figure. She could have prioritized her comfort over accountability. She didn't, and she faced death threats, constant harassment, and became a target for political attacks. That's the reality of challenging power. It's dangerous. It's unpleasant. It takes a toll. We should be grateful for people willing to do it. And we should do more to protect them when they do. Seventh, accountability is possible, but it requires us. Here's the most important lesson. The system doesn't self-correct. Powerful people don't hold themselves accountable. Bad behavior doesn't stop on its own. Accountability requires active effort. It requires people asking hard questions. It requires media doing investigative work. It requires voters caring enough to demand better. It requires sustained attention and pressure. The Ratcliffe hearing happened because Crockett decided to make it happen. The reforms came because people pushed for them. The incremental progress continues because people keep working at it. None of it was inevitable. All of it required human agency and sustained effort. Which means if we want accountability, we have to create it. We can't wait for the system to fix itself. We can't assume someone else will do the work. We have to do it, or it doesn't happen. 2 years ago, Jasmine Crockett asked John Ratcliffe a series of questions that lasted 92 seconds. Those questions, and the evidence behind them, ended a cabinet nomination and exposed a pattern of dangerous decision-making that had cost lives. It was a viral moment. It was satisfying to watch. It felt like accountability. But the real story is more complicated, more frustrating, more human. It's the story of career professionals who tried to do their jobs with integrity and were punished for it. Of families who lost loved ones because someone made bad decisions and then tried to hide it. of incremental reforms that help some people but don't fix the system, of sustained effort to maintain pressure for accountability, even when attention moves on. It's the story of how hard real change is, how resistant systems are to accountability, how much work it takes to move institutions, even slightly in better directions. But it's also a story of what's possible, of how preparation and courage can crack open doors, of how making costs visible can shift conversations, of how individual actions can matter even in massive, resistant systems. The 6 people who died in Yemen are still dead. No amount of accountability brings them back. Their families still grieve. The children who lost parents still grew up without them. But their deaths aren't forgotten. They're not just unfortunate casualties of a failed operation that everyone moved past. They're acknowledged. They mean something. They changed policies. They protected others. That's not enough. It's never enough when we're talking about preventable deaths. But it's something. It's more than would have existed without accountability. And maybe that's the lesson. Not that accountability fixes everything, but that it matters anyway. Not that one person can transform the system, but that one person can make it slightly better. Not that viral moments change the world, but that they can open spaces for people doing the unglamorous work of incremental improvement. Jasmine Crockett asked hard questions for 92 seconds. But the real work was the months of preparation before and the years of sustained effort after. The viral moment mattered because of everything surrounding it. The homework, the courage, the sustained pressure, the incremental reforms, the defense of those reforms against rollback. That's what accountability looks like in practice. Not heroic moments, but sustained commitment. Not transformational change, but incremental progress defended against constant efforts to reverse it. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. It's often thankless. But it's necessary. Because the alternative, accepting that powerful people can't be held accountable, that expertise doesn't matter, that people can die because of bad decisions without even an acknowledgement, that's unacceptable. So we do the work. We ask the hard questions. We support those who speak truth to power. We demand accountability, even when it's difficult. We celebrate progress, even when it's incremental. We keep pushing even when the system resists. Not because it's easy or satisfying, but because it's right. That's the real lesson of those 92 seconds. Not that accountability is simple or certain, but that it's possible and necessary. And it's up to us to make it happen. Every time. Every day. In every way we can. Because if we don't do it, no one else will. If this video made you think differently about accountability in government, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We break down the stories behind the headlines, the human costs, the systemic problems, and what actually changes when people pay attention. Drop a comment. What surprised you most about this story? Do you think the reforms went far enough? What else should Congress investigate? And if you want to support independent journalism that digs deeper than viral moments, check out the links in the description. Until next time, demand accountability. Support truth. Tellers. Never stop asking questions.